We're back with Season 7, Episode 12, Discordant Harmony. This is the episode in which Discord decides to throw a teapot party for Fluttershy. That's kind of it. That's the episode in a nutshell. This feels wrong. So. Yes, it's time to discuss death. First of all, death is like super totes, right? It's amazeballs. Wait a minute. Why are we talking about death? No, what we're talking about is the nature of boring. This is going to sound like the strangest thing I've said lately, but I found the intro where it's just the two of them having a tea party was weirdly engaging. Now, it's worth noting that that's because they actually did stuff. You know, there were actual character dynamics, there were two people talking with each other and interacting with each other and bouncing off of each other. So, there was character stuff there, right? I mean, how many of what I consider to be the best moments and scenes in Star Trek and Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica and Farscape, and in a show that isn't science fiction, are two people just acting off of each other? Some of my favorite scenes across all of Babylon 5, for example, are just when you put Londo and Jakar in a room and act off of each other, right? So it does matter what you do with it. But I bring this up because everyone finds different things boring, right? I know people who find video games boring, legitimately, because they just don't engage them properly. I know 4 people that I could count off the top of my head, personally, who are really legitimately engaged by spreadsheets, formulas, and SQL. And I'm one of them. Unashamedly. So I just point that out because it's interesting. I think this is part of the reason. How do I phrase this? Let me pause for a moment. I'm going to get just a little bit preachy. Just a little bit, okay? Is that okay? Now, obviously, the reason most people don't give MLP a chance is because it's just a show for girls, which is just stupid. Anybody who thinks that is a moron. Now, the reason that's moronic is very obvious and simple. Because it's a dismissive and therefore derogatory argument. It actually completely removes reality from the situation, focuses on a single bullet point, and presumes that bullet point to be the entirety of the argument. It's like saying that the only people who play video games are children, because video games are for kids. It's like saying that the only people who watch Star Trek are people who are loner losers. And honestly, I could name any other example. After all, the only people who are into sports are dumb jocks, right? This applies pretty unilaterally. So the arguments I hear, the surface arguments of not watching MLP are the exact same arguments I have heard for virtually everything, ever, for the last 30 years of my life. And honestly, 30 years is probably underballing it, because I've been hearing this crap since I was a kid. But that's the surface problem. I have a weird feeling, though, that some people dig a little bit down below that and look at the show and think, well, but there's no threat of the week. There's no big catastrophe and there's no... How can you have a television show be interesting if there's not some kind of villain to overcome every week? Those people are studio executives, obviously, but I'm pretty sure that there is a commonality and consensus amongst at least some viewers that seek that thing. After all, there's a reason the threat of the week trope exists. One of the things that I've loved most about going through MLP and covering it is how much it has shown how many additional types of events, circumstances, can still be engaging despite not involving someone showing up with a gun saying, "Mwahaha." Yeah, exactly, Ross. I just wanted to comment on that because my mind kind of started drifting as Discord was going out of his way to liven up the thing with his own little antics. And that poor sheep. Can I just say that? I mean, so he water faucet to wash his hands, and then he's got a sheep to dry off his hands, and he grows a tree to clean his teeth. But that poor sheep. However, what happens in this scene is something... Oh, absolutely, Ross. No question. What really sells me on this scene is a moment... I wrote an entire paragraph discussing this. There's a bit where he's like, oh, hang on. And turns it back to normal and says, there you go, back to normal, just the way you like it. That is a brilliant piece of storytelling. That one line and that one scene. Because that is a perfect example of showing, not telling. You know, I got something like stuck on my lip. I'll deal with it later. Let me explain for a moment. Discord, this is the best way. I mean, obviously this is foreshadowing for this episode. I'm not even going to touch on that because that's obvious. This is showing where Discord has come as a character. We talked as he was going through his character arc. And remember, I pointed out that it was more like a season and a half of like 5 episodes, you know, bit by bit, where he was slowly drifting through that character arc. But this is him having concluded that arc. This is the new Discord, formally and officially. Because he left the house in disarray, not out of malice, not out of cruelty, just because that's the kind of thing that's ordinary to him, so he doesn't really notice it. That's just normal, right? That's standard. When she's like, hey, can you help out? That's when he's like, oh, right, of course. And then immediately changes it because it'll make her happier. It's such a small thing, and frankly, there are people in real life who could learn this lesson. But doing those tiny little things, occasionally, within reason, to accommodate someone else or to make someone else happier, that's how you show you care. And the fact that Discord shows this says volumes about how much he has changed in the last 7 seasons, or six seasons at this point. And I just wanted to comment on that because it's a brilliant bit of characterization. And that's also, you know what, Ross, you're right. I didn't even jot that down. But you're right, the old Fluttershy wouldn't have even brought it up. She would have just tried to tidy it up herself and failed at it, and it probably would have gone down to a whole problem, right? But instead, she brings it up, and he fixes it. Small tidbit here, I noticed. You notice how Glass's Discord's voice is slightly lower in pitch? I just mentioned that. I also noticed that Discord does something that would make him a big fan of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I've noticed this before, I've just never commented on it before. He likes to subvert expectations. You know, I'm going to have this giant explosion, and then he disappears without an explosion. Or I'm going to do this, and then it does the opposite. You know, that's pretty much his modus operandi, and I don't know why I never really commented on it before. It's just something that occurred to me as I was watching this. Anyways, so he goes to the shop. Hold up. Discord can snap things into existence. In fact, even if you were somehow to argue he can't, which I don't know where you'd get that argument from, but let's assume for a moment that you want to make that argument. However, in this very episode, there's a bit where Discord asks for some sugar cubes. Fluttershy reaches for some, and there's no sugar cubes there. He says, don't worry, I'll just wink some into existence. So he can actually, what I call macate, he can generate something out of energy or nothing, right? So why does he go to the store? It's okay, I have an answer for this question. I'm just curious. The answer... I'm not seeing the answer I want so far. Or at least the answer I have. Dream Whisperer is probably the closest. Ah, there you go. There's the answer I was looking for. From Imperial Star Destroyer. He wants to put in the effort. I forget the exact quote. I meant to write it down. But he has this whole speech about you put so much work and effort into this. So he could just... But that's easy. So instead he does it the hard way. This is another great example of showing, not telling. Now, that's assuming I'm correct. If I'm wrong, then you may dismiss this as at your leisure. But if I am right, then this is a great example of another thing that a lot of people can use, and is very true in very real-life human interactions, is that when you show, when you put forth the effort, even when you don't have to, that shows how much you care. Allow me to give you a really dumb example of this. This is my phone, right? Some of you may or may not have seen me do something I call phone hugs. Now, this is something I invented back in the 90s, actually. But if I text someone the words phone hugs, what I then do after sending the message is I physically hug the phone. I do this every time. It's to show that I'm actually making that effort, even though I don't have to. They don't know I'm doing it, per se, and they'll never see me doing it. But I do that to show that I'm actually taking the action to add just that extra little bit of polish to it, to tie back to our Blizzard discussion earlier. And I think that's exactly what Discord is doing here. He doesn't have to go to a store, and he doesn't have to buy things, but he's doing it to put that extra little bit of polish into this event so that she can appreciate it all the more. And by the way, the reason I do that every time, and I make sure to do it when other people are around, is so that they know I do it, so that when they get the phone hugs, they know I'm actually doing it. I have established that canonicity of that, so that they now know I am doing it every time, and thus they get the extra little oomph of polish. Anywho, so he's at the store, and we'll get to her in a second, actually. But it just occurred to me, of course they have an entire shop devoted to tea. Yeah, what is on my lip? Ah, there. I guess that's not saying much. We have tons of specialty stores in real life. There's plenty of shops that are just devoted to tea. But what amuses me is that a place like Ponyville, which is not a particularly large town, has an entire shop devoted towards tea. I get the really strong impression that a lot of people drink tea there, especially since they have an entire shop devoted towards Tupperware. Not Tupperware, that's the wrong word. Stuff that you put other stuff in that isn't Tupperware. I just wanted to comment on that very briefly. Funnily enough, I don't actually know a tea shop around here. Now, if I jumped back about 6 moves, there was a tea shop at the local mall, which me and my sister went to all the time. But nowadays she has to import stuff, or rather, get stuff shipped to her. I don't know why I call that import. God, my words are gone today. Please forgive me. So anyways, she's putting the effort there. The tea shop owner is Kelly Sheridan. Just wanted to comment on that. Then we have the singing ginseng tea. Ba-ba-ba-doo. Ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-dee. For some reason, that's been stuck in my head. I know I have a good audio memory, but that little tune has been stuck in my head for years, ever since I first saw this episode. So this then leads to her saying, wait, you and Fluttershy are friends? I could probably spend a while just analyzing that sentence. So let's do it! First of all, it says a lot about how a town like this, everyone is at least somewhat familiar with everyone else, to the point where they know people on a first-name basis. Now, yes, I know Fluttershy is kind of a celebrity, but despite the fact that she is a celebrity, she's not exactly a vocal and social person, and yet she still knows Fluttershy on sight, so of course they know Fluttershy. Okay, first point established. Here's the interesting second point. They don't know Fluttershy. You remember, and I did this on purpose, because I think about these things. You remember how I commented earlier about how I guarantee you that the majority of people who dismiss video games or Star Trek or My Little Pony do so because of surface level, because they only look at the surface level and don't actually think about it? How much do you think that most of the people in town don't really know Fluttershy? They just look at the surface level and presume from there on. Now, in the interest of absolute fairness, again, Fluttershy is not exactly a very social butterfly, so she probably doesn't give them a lot of interactions to really judge her via, but let's be clear, someone like Fluttershy absolutely would be friends with Discord, even ignoring this episode, and anybody who actually knows her would know that. So now, I should also point out, though, that Discord gets rather defensive about this. Now, this is true with most people, but Discord especially, one of the most consistent characterizations for him is the fact that when someone asks about him in a manner that hurts him, or is truthful, or hits a nerve, or whatever, he gets really defensive really fast. Because obviously, well, that is a thought that is still going through his head, even now. Season 7, he's been around since the beginning of Season 2. And he's been reformed for, what, like 3 seasons at this point? He is still uneasy about his friendship. That makes sense. After all, I'm sure most of us are too. Now, there's exceptions, of course. But how many times have you ever had the thought, why are we friends? You know, you and someone else. This, I don't want to touch on this too much, but this absolutely applies romantically as well. Why are we together? Now, this is a huge morass of all kinds of gray, which I don't really want to touch on, because maybe you should be, and maybe you shouldn't be, and maybe there's good reason, and maybe there isn't. But that, the specific thing I want to focus in on is that uncertainty, that self-questioning, that, let's put a word to it, doubt, that just lingers in the back of your mind. Oh gosh, why am I with this person? Why are they friends with me? Why do they hang out with me? The second sales pony says, you sure you're friends? He gets much more defensive this time. She's also rude. Yeah, she says it much more rudely. The first pony was just kind of like, you sure you're friends with Flutterface? It's just kind of a pseudo-innocent little kind of questions. And then the next one was less. No, this is from Mario Galaxy 1 specifically. I had to think about that. It's a mix, obviously. Do I think Discord has friends other than Fluttershy? We've actually talked about that before. However, I would say Fluttershy is his only absolute friend. As I like to say, capital F friend. Like, for example, in real life, I have 3 of those, right? But do I think he is friends, lowercase f, with other ponies? Absolutely. I do think he has, over the course of the years, gotten closer to several of the others. We actually talked about that in the Season 6 finale, for example. Lost my train of thought. Where was I? Right. So, next thing that happens is he goes to the party place. Naturally, Pinky's there, buying an entire mountain of stuff. Duh. Nothing really needs to be added to that. What I love is when he starts having no ideas when it comes to the napkins. I only want to call attention to that. So I said earlier that this is the first truly Discord episode, an episode about Discord. I stand firm in that opinion. Not only does the camera follow him for the majority of the episode, but it also really delves into insight on him at a level that most of the others haven't, you know? And this little insight is one of those little wonderful bits of character building like that, because what it implies is that every time Discord does one of his little, boop, I'm going to do something wacky things, he has to think about it. Now, if you don't understand what I mean by that, what I mean is it doesn't just come naturally. It doesn't happen. He has to think, okay, what could I do with this? Oh, I know, and then he does it. And he gets to the napkins and he's like, I've got nothing. He hits a creative doldrum, right? And I'm sure anybody out there who's done anything creative knows exactly what that feeling is like when you just can't come up with something. When the well is just dry and you're like, what the hell do I do with this? You're staring at the painting like, I don't know what to add to this. Or you're staring at the song, or you're staring at the text, or whatever, right? So he has this moment of creative doldrums, and it helps to imply something else. How much effort Discord puts into being himself. I want you to remember that, because I'm going to bring it up later, okay? So, the funny thing is, the most common advice I have both given and received when it comes to getting out of creative doldrums is bring in another voice. Bring in a new perspective. Even if they're not going to solve it or fix it for you, having someone else looking at it can help, right? Enter Pinky, who is like, oh, well, you know her best, so you just do something that she likes and make her comfortable and you're good. And he's like, aha, that's it, of course. And so she says the perfectly right thing. I just need to make her comfortable, because I know her so well. And she also says, ironically, the perfectly wrong thing. I just need to make her comfortable. After all, I know her so well. Random question. You do not have to answer. In fact, I'd rather you not. I want you to think about someone you consider a friend. Let's say lowercase friend. How well do you know that person? Really? If you were called to task to come up with their favorite dessert or to cook a meal for them, or to make the perfect gift for them, could you? The answer might be yes, depending. But one of the things I have discovered is incredibly common, and we actually talked about this recently, is that people will only actually know each other at a surface level. They won't really know what they like and how they like it. So when it comes to food or gift or social interaction or activity or whatever, they just kind of flounder. There's a reason why the concept of a gift list exists. It's so you don't have to know what to give them. You just look at what they want, which they've written down for you. I run into this problem semi-frequently, mostly because of gifts and dessert, like I said, but my big three, I know them extremely well. I've got that. But those are my capital F friends. Everyone else, it's just... Huh. And I hate to ask, because that just cheapens it, right? Maybe that's just me. You get my point, though. And I bring this up because there's an understated tone, a note, as Discord is trying to figure out what Fluttershy likes, because Fluttershy is... Yeah, exactly, Lorraine. He does know Fluttershy well. He establishes that in this episode, but he freaks out because he's questioning, do I know Fluttershy that well? Are we really that good friends? He even has an actual honest-to-goodness panic attack. He realizes how different he and Fluttershy are, and the question pops into his head, maybe she doesn't want to be friends with me anymore. The rumination on Monsters University, which goes live sometime next year, touches on this exact same point. One of the things I really love about MLP is it's very relatable. A lot of MLP's best moments, my opinion, are the things that are very understandable and relatable on a very human, everyday level, right? Despite the fact that we're talking about a Draconequist who can snap his fingers to make things appear out of thin air. This is still an exceptionally human moment. And of course, as Ross points out, Fluttershy has done nothing to indicate this. This is pretty much straight-up anxiety. I've argued before that I don't think Twilight has anxiety, and this is probably my best evidence for that, because this is anxiety right here. This is him inventing out of whole cloth something and being afraid when there is no source of fear. That as it's been described to me, that is anxiety in definition. When the fight or flight response is triggered by nothing, right? So he starts, okay, I've got to redo the house. I've got to make it something that she likes. This is when, ironically, and I already mentioned this is when he proves that he does know Fluttershy pretty well. He knows what she likes and she knows what she is into for herself, of course, as we already pointed out. He also has a great line. We've never discussed it, but I'm pretty sure Fluttershy likes gravity. Now, I haven't commented a lot on the animation. I have to gush about the animation in this episode. I have to absolutely gush. There's not a lot of the facial stuff that they've been doing recently, but there's just ton upon ton upon ton of great visual gags, but also visual detail. Oftentimes, there's so much going on at a given point in time that I would have to rewind a scene, and I did this a few times for this particular viewing, just to make sure I caught everything. Because there's a lot of little details in this. There's a lot of polish in this episode, if I were to put it in that way. If I was in charge, I would have actually gone back and given these animators a bonus for this episode. No joke. Yes, I did notice the stamps in the box. I even put it down in my notes. And, of course, Fluttershy's comment about gravity, which I'll actually come back to later. But one of the best moments is when they have the six Discords on screen at the same time. And all of them are doing a different thing. Piñatas hate bats. That's what we call a stealth pun, by the way. Anywho, so animation team, absolutely just props. That being said, I do like the final Discord outfit. That's a good question, Trihexia, but I'll come to that in just a moment. Hi, Mr. Red. He has a red coat, so red coat, white shirt like I do. His tie is yellow. He's got purple glasses. It's a rather simple outfit, but it works quite well. And yeah, it's the Mr. Rogers outfit. But then again, Mr. Rogers made that work too, so I suppose I'm with it. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with something simple, and the color choice is very thought out. Fluttershy shows up and is immediately excited to see his place, the seat, the tea, everything, and is noticeably discouraged when everything is just normal. Side note, before we move into the next big thing. People make fun of talking about the weather as the kind of thing you do when you're boring or you don't know what to talk about. Those people are stupid. No, I'm sorry, that's not true. But anybody who talks about the weather and doesn't do it right probably runs into this problem. The thing is, talking about the weather is like talking about food. It's kind of a universal constant. Most of us are affected by the weather. It's actually really easy to turn talking about the weather into an actual discussion if you put actual effort into it. I just wanted to comment on that briefly, because I find it extremely easy to talk about the weather, but then again, I find it extremely easy to talk with total strangers, so what the hell do I know? That being said, I have to make a moment before we get into the big topic and discuss milk toast. I screwed it up. I said it wrong. Milk toast. Would you care for some milk toast? Love that. Love the little visual gags in this. There's a lot of them, but that's one I had to point out there. That's actually true. Weather is usually not offensive. And while people have different gradients of tolerance, there is such a thing as too cold and there is such a thing as too hot for basically everyone, right? Like, we have a band of acceptability. So, rain, you know? So then Discord starts to dissipate as he loses his discordance. This is gonna sound weird, but to me, this is the worst part of the episode. Really. Hear me out for a second. The reason why I dislike this is because this either implies absolutely nothing, or an enormous amount of things about this setting, and it doesn't actually discuss it or address it or analyze it at all. Not even in a showing, not telling kind of a way. It's just kind of there to prove a point. Now, the point is well proven. I'm going to skip past this point for just a second to the next major beat. Fluttershy has to help him figure out who he is, right? So the first thing she does is, oh no, I tipped over the teacup. That got a laugh out of me. And I'm going to take a bite out of every sandwich. How wacky. It's really cute. But what's amusing most, and the reason I'm willing to at least give a little bit of a pass on the him vanishing thing, is the fact that when called to task, Fluttershy does know Discord, just like Discord, when called to task, did know Fluttershy. They are friends, capital F. And yeah, she puts the effort for him just like he put the effort in for her. She even I mean, this is mostly done for visual gags, but you notice that she literally pulls out like the mirror and the toaster and the vase so she can talk to multiple hers, because that's what Discord would do. And okay, and she makes the fake staircase, and I'm pretty sure this is when Ogre's comment comes in. I'm pretty sure we never discussed about it, but I'm pretty sure Discord hates gravity. Random thought. Fluttershy is totally cool with someone who is anti-gravity because she can fly. Imagine if she was an earth pony. So there's a lot of cool stuff that happens. Again, great animation. And this is when the episode also tells what's already shown, which is pretty normal for MLP, as we've already discussed. And then we have our big topic, which I'm actually going to address last, because now I want to rewind back to the him vanishing thing. Why does he vanish? Now, near as I can tell, there are two specific points here that are possible. I'm saying this wrong. I'm sorry. There are 2 broad points here. Well, I hope you enjoy the food! Exclamation mark. And if nothing else, I hope you enjoy the company. Period. Also, comma, phone hugs! Exclamation mark. And appropriate musical cues. I'm not going to tell her that part, though. Hang on. That song's not supposed to play for this. Give me a second. I mean, I could just leave this song. This is very appropriate. Very appropriate My Little Pony music, right? Let's just go back to Tristram for now. Wait, no, I've got the perfect music for MLP. There's my sword. Sorry. Anyways, so yeah, let's get back to him vanishing. Now, again, like I said, I think this is the weakest part of the episode, because even if it makes perfect sense, which I don't think it does, it's not done for anything other than to make the message of the episode. It's done for its own sake, right? Now, that's not great, but it's not terrible. But that's my point. That's the nicest thing I can say about it, is that it's not acceptable. I mean, it goes up to just below 0, is the best thing I could say about this part of it. But let's presume they actually want to make a point here. So, 2 broad possibilities, right? Possibility number 1, he's faking it. To be clear, I don't think that. I don't buy that for a second. But if we're being honest with ourselves, that is possibility number 1. He is just straight up faking all of this. I don't buy it. It would also kind of go contrary to the whole point of the episode, which we haven't discussed yet. So let's just ignore that possibility, throw that out the window, and leave us with possibility number 2. He is actually... Yeah, that would be probably one of the most evil things he's done, Ross, if true. He is actually starting to lose cohesion thanks to lack of discordance. Now, I've said this before, and I want to be clear about this. Discord fits within the pattern. Discord fits harmony. Now, I know that sounds like a contrary statement, but if you look at the situations and use capital Discord and capital harmony, you see what I mean by that. The very idea that someone like Discord can have a friend, the fact that it's possible for Discord to have a friend, proves definitively that he fits within the harmonic pattern that I've referred to many times as we've been discussing this show, that he can be a part of harmony, right? He is his own part of harmony, IDIC, but he is still part of this overall connection. So, him not being himself causes him to lose himself. Okay, so now that we've established that this is probably actually happening, I think we're mostly on board with that idea, that brings us to 2 more broad possibilities. Either this only applies to him and beings like him, which are very rare, or this applies to everyone. Now, if this applies just to him, there's actually nothing to discuss. He's falling apart because he's canceling himself out the end. If this applies to everyone, ooh, we have just opened up a gigantic box of worms, which is bouncing all over the place and wriggling, and it's gross, and just get rid of him. Now, because there is nothing to discuss about the first thing, I'm not going to, because there's nothing to discuss. He's a Draconicus, Loner. That being said, I do have to point out that we have seen small bits of evidence throughout the series that when you are not yourself, and I don't mean like when you're out of character, I mean when you are really, and not being badly written, out of character, when you have changed your core identity, something bad happens, and bad things are a consequence of that. That has been a recurring element throughout this show. We saw that all the way back in Season 2, when they started going against their core natures and started slowly graying out. We saw this in Magical Mystery Cure when their cutie marks were swapped. We saw this in Our Town with the cutie mark magic that blanked out and removed their cutie marks, which literally removed their talents, and we're slowly dealing with that. And of course, we just recently saw this with Luna and Celestia. It is within the realm of possibility that what's happening here does apply to everyone, just not universally. In other words, what I mean by that is not everyone's affected by it to the same extent, but everyone is still affected by it magically, physically, magically impacted by not being themselves. And that's actually what I think is the case here, if I might be so bold. Not just because of the pattern, which, as I've said before, I don't think is a tangible, sentient entity, but rather because of the idea of the nature of how the world is built. The rules of the setting, if you will. You know, the entire idea of you being who you are and choosing who you are is the centric core element of what a cutie mark is, and has been a plot point many times. It's actually one of my favorite elements of the entire show, is the nature of being yourself, identity, which Lord knows is a hot button topic these days, and for good reason. But the dynamic of that identity, the dynamic of being you, who you really are, is something that appeals to me in general, and has already been demonstrated as being a setting point many times throughout this show. So that's my evidence for why I think this is actually happening to everyone to different extents, and the reason it's getting him so badly is because he is going completely contrary to himself, by choice no less, and is himself, let's be honest, not a normal being. He walks around as a Draconequus, but it could be argued that Discord is an energy being, not a matter being, right? And so something like him being affected by this is affecting him so much more because of his nature, my opinion. Now, this is all speculation. Yeah, but as I said, one of the biggest flaws of the episode is it introduces this point just to make a quick message and then gets rid of it. It doesn't sit and analyze or discuss the huge implications that this really has. But I do think that there's enough implication and evidence in other episodes to imply that this is something that is a setting point, not merely a visual gag for one episode. And that's an extremely good point, Ross. Ross points out this could be something to do with their location. They're in the realm of what they name it at some point. I forget what it's called, but they're in his realm, right? They're in the realm. That poor parcel pony. Right? So yeah, no, I think that I still think this is the weakest moment of the episode. It does bring it down a bit. Mostly because it's just, hey, and it's gone. I will admit I've got a little bit of free will on the brain lately because I've been covering Lorecraft, and choice is actually a big narrative beat in World of Warcraft. But then again, as I've said many times, it is also a big narrative point, even in MLP. Choosing and being yourself is a huge element of this show. And this episode. Interesting idea, Larian. Oh, I would agree, Ross. I do think it brings down the episode, because if they actually analyzed and discussed this point, that would kind of be awesome, in my opinion. You know me, I love world building. It's one of the reasons I love Cutie Mark Crusader episodes, because most CMC episodes are really big on world building, and we'll actually see that in just a few episodes, I think. Is it Camp? No. I know there's an episode. It's when they have... there it is. Marks and Recreation. There it is. Marks and Recreation. Episode 21. So we will be discussing the world building that the CMC does again in a few weeks here. But they don't do anything with it. So it's just kind of like, oh, okay. Nevertheless, this is a very good episode, especially since it ties to that core thing. Now, I've kind of drifted into the second point I was going to discuss already, because it's so related to the first point. And that second point is identity, which is the core element of the episode. I mean, yeah, there's bits about friendship and knowing yourself and knowing your friends. How many of you have ever had someone basically say, wait, you're friends with such and such? Or, you're dating such and such? Now, in the interest of fairness, plenty of people probably shouldn't be connected to each other. Let's be honest, especially romantically. But let's leave this in the realm of friends to make this easier. It helps to emphasize that Discord is who he is and should be who he is without shame. Because who he is not a bad person, no, Trihexia. And Fluttershy is basically the same way. Now, she already doesn't have that, but this episode is all about Discord overcoming his own anxiety and his own doubt of who he is. Really, not surface level, to touch on that point for the third time, but who he actually is. And I think that's actually kind of an awesome thing. Because on the one hand, you don't want to just stay the same forever. That's just stagnation at that point. That's stubbornness and, dinosaur mentality. But on the other hand, who you really are is who you really are. And that is especially true in a setting where there's something on most ponies' flanks that is a visual identifier of who they really are. You know? And yeah, I agree. Fluttershy helped to reinforce that right at the end. Because it makes sense, and it does, let's be clear about this. It actually makes perfect sense that Fluttershy and Discord would be friends, capital F. Not just because they know each other, not because they just could be interacting further, but because the two have a good dynamic. The two fit pretty well together. I would say that even if I didn't know the show, if you just gave me like a character synopsis, I'm like, well, because I've said so many times, good fiction doesn't just have good characters, it has good connections between characters. Those connecting points between the characters are what really elevate a show, right? Bashir and O'Brien. God, let me try to think of something that isn't Star Trek for a second. Look, I've analyzed Star Trek for like 10 years. What do you want from me? Londo and Jakar. Crichton and Aaron is a good one. We'll switch over to Farscape. How about Teal'c and... Oh my god, I can't think of his name. The Colonel. So Han and Leia is actually a good one, too. That is a good one, over in Star Wars. Connections between people. O'Neill, thank you. Teal'c and O'Neill. The connections between people are what really elevate fiction above and beyond, in my opinion. And that's where the really high marks come. And there is absolutely a great connection between Discord and Fluttershy. Also, water is wet. But that's another thing. Ross just brought it up. I was just about to talk about this, I swear, because it's my final line there. Is that we need that reinforcement every now and again. Don't we? We need to hear it, or have it shown to us that we are friends for a good reason, or that we do matter, or that we are a good fit, or whatever, right? We need that kind of reinforcement. There's no better way to put it. Validation. I lied. Apparently there's a better way to put it. Thanks, Frost. We do, not all of us, of course, but we do need that kind of validation periodically. I will freely admit that I need that kind of validation periodically because I doubt myself constantly. Now, I do that deliberately to make sure that I don't, screw up or fall into things like dinosaur mentality. But still. Oh god, Trihexia, that's messed up. Possible, though. It's okay, Baron. You are awesome. I've already said that, and I already meant it. Let's rate this episode. So, someone, Ogre, already gave his postulation on what this episode should be reviewed. We've had yellow, green, orange, green, blue. Season 7 has been kind of all over the place, actually. I'm skipping over some, because then we had purple and red. Season 7 has been yo-yoing like crazy. But I find myself agreeing. This isn't purple. If they had really delved into the world building, that might have actually elevated this to purple for me. But I do still think this is red. There's a lot of excellent animation, lots of showing, not telling, lots of great character moments. The connection between the two characters is great. even the worst thing I can say about this episode is, as was already pointed out, more of an absence of a positive than a, you know, an actual negative. So, I agree. This is a red. Which means the Fox brothers? Are they brothers? I don't know. The Fox writing duo has thus far produced a red, a green, 2 yellows, and a red. An interesting trend. Next week, what are we covering next week? Because we're back to normal here. Well, pseudo-normal. So next week we've got... Here, I'm sorry. So next week we've got Perfect Pair and Fame and Misfortune.